That is
Hey,
good
Mina,
content.
do you remember when quarantine started and Tom Brady was now suddenly
Yeah.
in Tampa Bay? And when I found out, you were there with a camera recording my reactions and reveling in them.
Right.
I just wanted
We
to
did a
let
live.
you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you know I didn't forget.
My hair looks good today.
Pablo, enjoy this. Live in the moment because this is why we're here. Because it comes back around to us at some point. But when it isn't us, we gotta enjoy it. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
the other stuff sucks. So I'm gonna smile my way through this topic. But I'm also gonna be there for you emotionally, Mina.
It doesn't feel like that's what's gonna
After
happen.
the dunk, I'm gonna hug you and we're gonna talk about what happened.
Could you see Russell Wilson and Mina's beloved Seahawks parting ways in the near future?
What?
So aggressive.
Yeah, so apparently there was this article in The Athletic covering the relationship between Russell Wilson and Mina Kimes' beloved Seahawks. And, sum it up for you guys. It's not great. It's not great. Russell Wilson is unhappy. It's a thing that we've discussed kind of vaguely, that now we've got more weight to put behind it. It appears that he wants to be considered in a tier of quarterbacks that he currently feels he's being held back from being considered a part of. And he's upset with Pete Carroll's conservative play style and wants to be heard and seen and respected for his accomplishments. I think from what I've read in this article, it makes sense. I mean, as Mina would have to attest to, let Russ cook was a thing that the fans said that clearly either went to Russell's head or was what influenced the fans to feel that way. So it does exist. You can't ignore that it's there. And while he hasn't out and out asked for a trade, which seems to be easier for players to literally do now, he didn't do that. But it's basically out there that he's probably considering a trade, to the point where teams have been mentioned. And so this seems like an issue with relationships within this organization that needs to be fixed. And I'm just curious to know, Mina Kimes, how you feel it will be.
So, okay. The question first was, do you see a split in the near future? And my answer is no, because that would cost Seattle $39 million this offseason. And I realize we're coming off of a monster trade with the Rams and the Lions both taking 20-something million dollar dead cap hits. The Rams wanted to upgrade a quarterback. The Lions are rebuilding. Seattle's in neither of those situations. It would be franchise suicide for them to move on from Russell and take that sort of cap hit this year. That said, the underlying issues are real. And Katie, you nailed it when you mentioned the conservative head coach, because I think that's at the crux of this. We can talk about the production, with some of which Russell Wilson himself is culpable for this particular season. But in reality, what we're looking at is a Hall of Fame quarterback who is chafing under a defensive head coach. And I don't blame him, because if you look at the last Super Bowl winners and you take out Bill Belichick, they have all been offensive since Russell Wilson went to the Super Bowl. If you look at the Final Four from last season, again, offensive head coaches, and Sean McDermott, who had a brilliant play caller underneath him, and Brian Dable. It makes sense that Russell Wilson would like to maximize the remaining years of his career and that he's frustrated with what's happening in Seattle. So can it be fixed? I think it falls upon Pete Carroll at this point. Is he willing to concede in some ways and let offense take over? It's not about let Russ cook. Let them take a more aggressive approach. I think if he's willing to do that, this can be fixed. But if not this offseason, but in the future, you might see Russell Wilson actually push to move on.
My favorite part about Mina's answer there, which was so dead on from a football analysis perspective, is that the let Russ cook movement was sort of third person there, as opposed to what it should have been, which is emblazoned all over Mina Kimes' t-shirt and clothing and signage behind her. Because Mina, let Russ cook was a thing that I mostly learned about from you. Russell Wilson, I think, learned this from you, Mom. And for me, the thing about Russell Wilson and his aspirations to be in the kitchen to really flip this gender dynamic all over its head, it's the fact that Russell Wilson wants to be considered what Katie said, a top 5 all-time quarterback. And Pete Carroll, who I don't really love in most respects, but I do think has something of a point here. I think he's skeptically looking at Russell Wilson and saying, look, man, we gave you all the cooking privileges this past season. And the way that this season ended, right? The last 8 or so games, right, Mina? He was not good. Russell Wilson was struggling by every metric. Yards per attempt was abysmal. And I think Russell Wilson has lost the trust of his coaches who are revoking those cooking privileges. And there is no Gordon Ramsay in this metaphor, unfortunately.
What?
Pete Carroll, I think, is just passive-aggressive enough and complicated enough for this not to be a story of two enemies. Keep in mind, Pete Carroll was the guy who was criticized previously for being too nice to Russell Wilson. And so again, Pete Carroll is saying, look, we tried it. I was really nice to the guy. I let him pass whenever he wanted, and this is how it wound up. So sorry, Russ. No, you're not a top 5 quarterback like Joe Montana.
But is Russell Wilson allowed to say this season was an outlier? Because that feels like something we can always say in retrospect, but we never say in the moment. We're like, look, they let you do it, and you were bad at it. And he's like, yeah, but I've been begging you to let me do it for a while. You give me one shot, and if I'm not perfect, you're like, that's why we don't let you do it? That is an abusive relationship dynamic that should not exist. There needs to be genuine support and care between the two of them. Pete Carroll doesn't just get to get credit for being too nice to him when we can see that he's not genuinely listening to him. And that doesn't mean the quarterback thinks he should run the organization, because obviously that's not his job. But when somebody doesn't listen to you for long enough and genuinely listen to you, like hear you, not just hear the words you're saying, but hear what you're trying to say to them, you're going to get to a point where you try to reach for more than you can grab because you just want something from the other side. You want give as opposed to just take.
Are we still talking about Russell Wilson?
I don't know. Probably.
Are the Jazz the best team in the NBA?
When this question was originally phrased in the email, it said better than Mina's Brooklyn Nets. And so I just want to make sure that that part still makes it in, or else the context is completely lost. Yes, this is a question about the Jazz, which might be very exciting to people who accuse the media of having coastal biases. Here's the thing, Pablo probably, and maybe even Mina, will find a way to make this into a question about the Jazz's opponent last night, the Lakers. That's why we're finally having the conversation we should be having, which is the conversation being had by coaches across the league, which is what the Jazz are doing this season is awesome. They beat the Lakers last night by double digits. They routed them. In the last 2 weeks, they've beat the Lakers, the Bucks, the Celtics, a lot of teams. I included the Celtics to make myself feel better. A lot of teams that are considered very good, and they've beat them by a margin that's in an average of the double digits. They're doing very, very well. They've won 15 straight at home. This is a team that has multiple pieces that seem to be working together in a way that's very effective, and they're hitting threes. They're making more 3 attempts, and then they're making the threes. That's just math. I'm not good at math, but I know that 3 is bigger than 2 and that it adds up a lot quicker. That's basically what it comes down to. They're a great and fun team to watch. Respected coaches are comparing them to teams that ended up going on to succeed in ways that we still talk about. Steve Kerr is comparing them to what the Warriors used to be. Brad Stevens is comparing them to the 13-14 Spurs. So these are things we should be paying attention to and talking about. But like I said, I'm sure Pablo is going to make this about the Lakers. Now they don't have Anthony Davis.
Well, Katie Nolan, first off, thank you for joining the analytics revolution. 3 being bigger than 2 is actually the fundamental precept of all of our nerdery on the NBA side. More than that,
that's true.
I do want to give my, respect to the Jazz, because the argument for the Jazz is incredibly strong. There's no doubt that in the regular season right now, they are the best team. They are 20 games above 500. They have been up by 20 points 20 times this season. They are the only team in the league to be top 5 on offensive efficiency ratings and defensive efficiency ratings. No one is as balanced or as good. No one has an offense and a defense that is this dynamic. The main counter argument, though, and the reason why I'm not picking them to be the NBA champion this season, unfortunately, is also because they are the Utah Jazz. And it's not just because they're named the Jazz and they're in Utah, and that has never made any sense to anybody. It's simply because those 2 best players that they have, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, excellent. One's an offensive dynamo. The other might be the best defensive player in the league. Second to Ben Simmons, perhaps. The issue is that they're still a tier below the superstars like, and Katie Nolan, yes, take your victory lap, Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And when we get to the playoffs, it's still that kind of math that I keep on leaning on.
That's the core question that makes this Jazz team so interesting, because their success seems to fly in the face of everything we have learned about the NBA over the last few years, which is that it is worth sacrificing depth in order to build a super team or a big two or a big three. Meanwhile, the Jazz legitimately seem like a team where the sum is greater than the parts. As you guys have painstakingly laid out, they rank in the top three in just about every statistical category. They're really fun to watch.
Yes.
Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, two of the most likable players in the NBA. Rudy Gobert is also there. And yet, I cannot help but feel like I've seen this movie before. Though if it was an actual movie, the band of scrappy underdogs would win. But in the NBA, they do not in recent years. Steve Kerr compared them to the Warriors. The Warriors had superstars. I love Donovan Mitchell. I'm not sure he belongs in the same tier as Anthony Davis or Kevin Durant of my beloved Nets. And when those two guys come back in the postseason, I just can't pick against them because of what we've seen in this league recently.
Yeah, that's spoken like a person who has thrown the weight of her name behind a team that built their entire thing on the value of superstars. So, of course, you're going to say without superstars, you can't get it done. I think something that is absolutely not sports related, but absolutely relevant here is the fact that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert having a great relationship is part of what's able to power this team. And they should not have that relationship.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be speaking to one another, but they are, and they're communicating well. And to me, that is indication that this team is maybe capable of doing stuff they should not be capable of doing.
It is a shocking fact, Katie, almost as shocking as the fact that we're just letting Mina go on national television and say my beloved Nets, and we all just kind of nod now. Yeah.
They just followed me back on Twitter.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
She doesn't deserve it. Take it back.
Hashtag
Why?
follow together.
It's a scam. It's a
Hashtag Harden
scam.
MVP.
She's using you. She will dispose of you the second you are no longer useful.
Up next on HQ.
I'm worried this is going to be offensive. So
It's
take it out
going
if
to
it
be
is.
bad more than it is offensive.
Do you question what we should read into JJ Watt's latest social media posts?
I question that Mina started sitting up straight. Now she looks taller than me. JJ Watt has been sending out tweets, and people want to know where he's going. They're looking for a sign in every single thing that he does. I'm not sure if there are signs to be found, but if there are, we're going to find them right now. Let's take a look at the tweets from JJ Watt. First, we had him talking about how long it takes for him to choose a restaurant on DoorDash, and so he needs time to pick a team. Then he just tweeted, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And then finally, what does that say? It's very blurry. It's something
Scary
hours.
Scary hours.
Okay.
Scary
and then
hours.
Scary
Yeah.
hours.
midday naps, loathed as a child, revered in adulthood. Look, to explain mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, I believe, if you're not online as much as I am, and it's not something that I'm proud of, it's something you should feel proud of if you aren't. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell is like a meme, because it's like weirdly one piece of information we have all retained from science class that we shouldn't have. It's just like Nina Pinta Santa Maria. Why do we all know the names of 3 ships that really don't in any way affect
They
our
sailed the
lives?
ocean blue, Katie. They
It
sailed
doesn't
the
matter.
ocean blue.
It doesn't really matter what the ships were named, and yet we all know it. And so I understand he may just be memeing, but that also happens to be the only tweet in which I see a real hint, which is that it's going to be the Browns.
Why are we indulging in this? No, Mina.
Energy Stadium.
No, First Energy Stadium, mitochondria, cell, CELL, Cleveland.
Well, that's
while we're
that's
here,
a lot. That's a lot.
Scary
for me.
Hours, Drake, God's Plan, God's Son is Jarvis Landry's Twitter handle. Midday Naps. Okay, the Cleveland Naps were the first professional baseball team in Cleveland. Connect
Oh
the
my
dots,
God.
people. It's all there.
The Naps.
Can I just predict for a second? This is all going to be a thing that JJ Watt wasn't even clever enough to come up with himself. It's going to be orchestrated by Jimmy Kimmel, and then we'll find that out like when he makes his choice. But in the meantime, sure, let's indulge.
Yeah.
Let's indulge in all of that Winona Ryder gifting that Mina Kimes is doing.
It sounds
This
like a
is
guy who
like-
has free time for the first time in a while, and he's just like, "Hey, napping, pretty cool."
Yeah.
He should be tweeting blatant, like veiled facts about all the cities that people are like. He should be tweeting about how much he loves buffalo wings. He should be tweeting about all these things that people can then try to connect the dots, create chaos, and then be like, "Guys, I'm just kidding. I'm going here."
This is clearly the example of a player who is for the first time enjoying free agency in earnest and all of the attention, to which I say, JJ Watt, like, you are way too golden ratio to be stunned by like, oh my God, all these people like me. Dude, yeah, people like you, JJ Watt. Newsflash.
Do you question if UNC fans should be satisfied with this answer?
All right, so UNC lost to Marquette in a game that wasn't on the schedule until very recently because of situations with, the pandemic that's still here. And then after the game, Roy Williams gave this explanation.
What would you say to Carolina fans who are questioning whether or not it made sense to schedule this game considering the result?
Well, if I'd known we were going to lose, God Almighty, I wouldn't schedule the thing. Come on, we can't operate in damn hindsight. God Almighty. If you'd told me we were going to lose, hell yeah, we wouldn't have played the game. If you'd told me we were going to beat the Lakers, I'd schedule them. Carolina fans, they're not that dumb. If they are, I got no answers for them.
What? That is not the question that was asked. It wasn't like, if you knew you were going to lose, would you have played? But it's very convenient because it gives you a way to walk away from having to answer it.
But that was the mistake that young journalist made. That clause at the end of his question, he said, considering the result, which was a toss-in, really. It wasn't the substance or the meat of the question. The problem is that Carolina's on the bubble. Marquette is not a tournament team, but Marquette has high upside. They're a tough team to play. This is a quad 3 game for Carolina. In nerd speak, it means you don't really get much if you win it, and they lost it. And now Roy Williams got that last bit of meat to rub it in that reporter's face because he made the rookie mistake of giving him something to bite into.
I just like how Roy Williams, because of his manner and how he speaks, can get away with saying anything. And everyone's like, oh, Roy Williams, at it again. Like, he's just so folksy. It would be like if I tried to channel my inner Roy Williams and said to you, like, oh, I'm worried this is going to be offensive. So
It's
take it out
going
if
to
it
be
is.
bad more than it is offensive.
I want it. I'm going to be silent till she does it.
Katie and Pablo, I hate you. You suck. I hate doing the show with you. You're terrible human beings, if you know what I mean.
No? I have no idea what you mean.
It's charming.
I don't think he would say that.
I also
Yeah.
have no idea what you mean.
Please edit. Please edit.
A company like Amazon behind me.
Tonight at 11:35 p.m. Eastern, Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Ah, yes, another late night show that we're going to ask you if you're intrigued to watch, even though the one we're referencing already happened. But you know what? Shout out Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, I'm intrigued. Kevin Garnett went on Kimmel and was talking about what happens every time he sees Jordan.
Is this something like that Michael remembers, or is this something that is burned only into your brain?
Well, I like to think that it's definitely burnt into my brain. But wherever I see Jordan, he always does the same thing every time. He palms my head and he says, "You remember I gave you 40 3/4?" And I was like, "Man, go ahead." And then he has like this sidekick of people around him. He's like, "Hey, pull that up." And then the guy goes and pulls it up. And I'm like, what is this? Who walks around with this? This is really Jordan, bro. Who walks around with content? Like teed up, like yeah. It was an experience in which I quit talking trash to Michael.
Michael has a guy who walks around with highlights packages. That is
already teed up, Jimmy. I couldn't believe it. It was a true Jordan Brand moment.
I love it. I love that Michael Jordan has like if you watch Veep, he has like a Gary who's there with the context, ready to provide it for anybody that you're talking to. Mina, are you intrigued?
I am intrigued, not just by the show, but also by the very concept of having someone who is with you, like holding up an iPad at all times, ready to play a clip like this one.
I just thought your
What?
opponent was more agile, but it was a box.
Agile?
are you familiar with the word agile and also intrigued?
How about we play the clip of the time Mina thought a baby horse was called a fowl?
I don't remember that.
I don't see a
I don't
clip.
think it happened.
Unless I see a
I don't see a
clip.
clip.
Are we,
Nope,
you-
nope, there's
You really?
no,
Really?
no clip.
That my request
Play
didn't come
agile
through?
again.
That didn't come
Play
through?
agile again. Play agile
I just
again.
thought your opponent was more agile.
Why?
But it was a box.
Agile?
I pronounce it like a British person. Mina Kimes pronounces full like an absolute maniac, and I'm getting dunked on HQ. Great. Very good.
All right, that's it for Highly Questionable. That's
It's
Mina
over?
Kimes. If you want more of her, you can get it everywhere, mostly on the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny or NFL Live. You can also get more Pablo Torre on ESPN Daily, a podcast that used to be hosted by Mina Kimes.
Sure. That's relevant.
Mine's called Sports with a question mark. Had Pablo then thrown to a clip, I would have actually felt so relatable to myself in high school, but so left out from like this friendship that you guys colluded with producers to have your clips thrown to. And I was like,
Oh,
I thought we
if
were
only.
just commenting on KG.